One of the most important things in After Effects is you got to learn how to bring stuff in, which we've done, and you got to learn how to spit stuff back out. That guidance will largely come from your post department when you're talking about final delivery, but when it comes to working with elements that you've built yourself in After Effects, there's a couple principles to get on top of. So we're going to introduce ourselves to the render queue right now. The way you send a comp to the render queue is by hitting either Control M, and then you have to choose a name for the file that you're going to create. It's auto-named as the comp name, which is just fine for us. It's going to be called Shapeshifters Group Video for Windows. That's a .avi file. That's fine for us. Mac users, you're going to render a .mov. It's identical in impact in your After Effects project, and we're going to put it into a footage folder inside the tutorial. Let's put it in the renders folder. So just double-click your way into there and hit Save. That's good. And then you'll notice that the Render Queue tab, which we've thus far ignored in our tutorial, is lit up yellow, which means it's ready for us to work with it. Why don't you tilde that open and we'll look at the details. We don't want to dig too deeply right now into the options inside the Render Queue, but we do want to make use of a concept that we used earlier on in our training, which is alpha. We're planning to render a movie that we're going to reuse in After Effects, and we want to be able to reuse it, keeping all aspects of it as transparent as they are in the composition in which we worked. So we'll choose AVI, and then we'll click on the word lossless. That's the default. After Effects by default is going to render a flawless, perfect, high-res file, which is usually what we want. But to this file, we want to add alpha to the RGB default, which means that instead of just rendering the red, greens, and blues and a flat movie, we're going to add that extra alpha channel to it so we can make this movie see-through. We're going to leave the format options also as the default, which is no compression, but there are a lot of options in there. Again, we're not going to go into this right now. And we don't need any audio for this. There's some other options about resizing it and cropping it on the way out, which we don't need to worry about for right now. So click OK, and then render settings. You might just make sure that you've got the default of best settings chosen, which is keeping everything at full res. And then when you're ready, hit render, and you'll notice how fast this works. After Effects 7 has really improved the render engine over previous versions, and it's got a better sound. One option I could have chosen while rendering was to have it auto import after it was done. We'll do that later on another piece that we make. But for right now, we're going to just import it the old-fashioned way. We'll double-click in the project window and go to the footage folder, tutorials, renders, and our Shapeshifters font change should be there waiting for us. Let's bring that in. Let's double-check that it rendered the way we were hoping. Let's go ahead and make sure that we're fit up to 100% so we can see as well as possible. You might have your background checkboard still turned on. Make sure to toggle it off and see your letters against whatever background you happen to render against. Again, it doesn't matter because we rendered with alpha, so this is going to appear like that when we put it into a composition with much of it transparent. So looks like that render is successful. Just before we move on, let's do a little housekeeping. We're getting a little too many layers here in our project window. Let's take everything that's a comp except for our master comp, and we can Control or Command click all of those and put those in the comps folder. And let's put our Shapeshifter Fonts Change AVI into our MOV folder, which is our movie folder. Let's take the After Effects project file and put that also into comps because that's what was in that folder. We'll Control S to save, and then let's just close all the comps that we don't need right now. So we have only our master comp and our render queue open, again hitting save. So now that we've got all of our footage organized a little bit more cleanly, let's place our render into our master comp. Your master comp should be enabled. Twirl open the movie folder, and we'll grab Shapeshifter Fonts Change.avi, alt drag it in like we worked on before. You can do it in the timeline or the composition. We'll do it in the timeline. And you'll notice that the running time of the rendered clip is different than the running time of the comp. So let's just drag it back to a place in our composition where we would want it. That looks like a good place to me for right now. in terms of time, but you'll notice that it's landed a little too low in the composition window. There's a general layout rule that applies to photography and sort of any graphic design, that you want to stick with a rule of thirds in the work that you do. There's a couple different interpretations of what that means, but in general, if we broke our screen into sections, we'd want to keep our most important information right around the center or along the thirds lines of the frame. In our case, because this is a graphic design element and leading towards the main title of our show, I think it might make sense to go ahead and move it up. Just keep it centered, but move it up to a little bit above the center line of the frame, perhaps resting right on it. That'd be a good place for us to be, and we'll just double check again that it's see-through, which it is, and we're in shape to move on to the next step, which is to add this back into the work we'd already built, that wonderful background, and make this section of our composition complete. Let's unsolo it for right now. You'll notice there's a lot of busyness. We're going to clean a lot of this up. Let's turn our light back on. Let's take the guide layer that we had turned on before. We'll turn it off. Let's make it shy since we don't need it immediately accessible to us. And we're about to layer these things together in such a way that we highlight this central text as much as possible. We're going to do a couple animation tricks to make it add a little bit of sex appeal to it.